So for people that make the statement, who knows what God's will is, you obviously haven't heard of the Urantia Book. In this epic 2,000-page narrative, God's will is no longer an ambiguous mystery. And the rough cosmic hierarchical structure is spelled out to the reader, along with the primary reason why we are all here finally provided. If you thought being given the answer to how we can make it to the next plane of existence was mind-blowing stuff, the Urantia Book takes such a spiritual progression 6 steps further when it comes to the stages of spiritual ascension. In fact, it is speculated after ages from now, when the ascender has made it to the 7th stage of spiritual existence, that such perfected beings of evolutionary ascent will undoubtedly become the most effective universe administration ever to be known in all of creation, found in 19.2.5. However, at that point of existence, will you still be the same person? The journey of a human being from the evolutionary dust of creation to the administrative heights of the outer space levels is the most expansive story ever told. The pinnacle of this achievement most certainly has to do with being in the direct presence of the 3 deities of the God figurehead, that is each unique with their own superlative attributes. To understand the forecast provided in paper 32, when it comes to the creature ascension scheme, one must first look at the foundation of the mortal career. Such an epic career begins in worlds such as Urantia, where life is fragile and the environment is often harsh. From our personality creation to the breath of life that animates all creature life, God then provides the same invitation that he gives to all of us, found in 1.0.3, which states, "Be you perfect, even as I am perfect." Yes, for those of you that know Genesis 17.1 or Matthew 5.48, this commandment should not be all that foreign to you. Fallibility, disease, and aging is not a mistake of creation, but a deliberate teaching choice by the Creator's sons. Yes, having adversity in one's life can lead to spiritual catastrophe if you do not see the divine leading in such an uneasy state. After all, there would be no growth, no adventure, and no purpose if things were inherently perfect. 48.6.5 states, sometimes the planting of a seed necessitates its death, the death of your fondest hopes, before it can be reborn to bear the fruits of new life and new opportunity. And from them, you will learn to suffer less through sorrow and disappointment. First, by making fewer personal plans concerning other personalities, and then by accepting your lot when you have faithfully performed your duty. This passage means to me that you must first be flexible in life, cherish other people's freedom to choose for themselves, and focus more on one's technique than overall outcomes. You might be surprised to hear that the central universe of Havona is inhabited by 1 billion perfected worlds, consisting of many forms of perfected beings. But perfection is most certainly our end goal, and most certainly is not our starting point like other entities. By starting at the lowest possible point of sentient existence, the human creature is forced to develop a unique type of experiential wisdom, fueling the currently manifesting and self-actualizing creature experience form of God known as God the Supreme. This experiential wisdom is the primary reason why humans, and not higher-ordered spiritual beings, are destined for the Corps of Finality. As perhaps a tragic contrast of other celestial beings, the celestial guardians in 22.9, who lack ascendant experience, routinely acknowledge their deficiencies due to their lacking of experiential capacity being time-space inhibited. In other words, the celestial guardians frequently acknowledge a specific deficiency. They lack the personal history of growth. While they possess immense divine knowledge, they recognize that their capacity is restricted by the fact that they have never experienced the slow, step-by-step mastery of time-space reality that characterizes human ascension. An angel has never known hunger. A Melchizedek has never known the true fear of mortal death. Only a mortal who has survived the short and intense life of the flesh, with a relative notion of the freedom to choose, can an individual truly empathize with the struggles of the new orders of beings that will eventually inhabit the outer space levels. The Urantia Book makes it clear that an ascender isn't necessarily judged harshly on their mistakes, but rather on their intent. Part of the way they accomplish this is determining whether such a behavior was due to self-interest or iniquity. So in other words, to err is to make a simple mistake simply because you did not know any better. If you grew up in a South American village that worshipped a rock because it was part of your culture, then your lack of knowing any differently will be used in your defense, and such an action will most certainly not be used against you. However, when transgressions are made deliberately, when of course the offender knows better, and generally places their own self-interest ahead of others, then such an action may qualify as a sin. When this occurs, if such an individual has a sincere desire to do better, that even a sinner has the capacity to receive the mercy ministry granted to us initially by Christ Michael. Now, when sin becomes persistent, and when the offender actually begins confusing evil actions as being good in total rebellion against God, as Lucifer did, then such actions may qualify as iniquitous behavior, which may lead to spirit extinction by the Ancients of Days. Now, there's some conjecture when it comes to the statement here. After all, if we were being judged by the Ancients of Days, in this scenario, our soul would be at risk since we are not yet spirit. However, a Lenandadek son such as Lucifer was already a spirit when they defied their universe sovereign, which likely indicates that they do not have a Urantia soul. Either way, the punchline here is cessation of existence, or as though he had not had been. Found in 2.3.4. These mercy credits are awarded to every soul or rational creature who truly desires divine citizenship that can be found in 28.6.5. However, just keep in mind, your alignment with divine ideals may adjust your ascension path accordingly, associated with spirit, son, and father-fused individuals. Some of the highest alternative ascension paths may include mighty messengers, those in high authority, and those without name or number, who actually get to receive Trinity embrace, as the mortal ascender makes their way through the mansion worlds. Of the local system, the focus is on remediation of earthly deficiencies. They learn to function in a Urantia body, a state of being that is neither fully physical nor fully spiritual. It is the same material that God's temple will be made from in the era of light and life on our planet, and is the very substance your thought adjuster is weaving at this very moment. That constitutes your human soul. This transitional stage is crucial because the future administrators of the outer space levels will likely need to interact with various levels of reality, from the crudely material to the highly ethereal. Paper 32 suggests that the systems developing beyond the 7 super-universes are currently being prepared by the primary master force organizers. These beings are the cosmic engineers who agitate the primordial space potency into the first stages of matter. While this is happening, the billion-strong ranks of the Corps of Finality are being assembled on Paradise, undergoing a resting phase that is actually a period of intense preparation for the first outer space level that is likely for a future time when our super-universe is established in light and life. The term light and life is most easily identified as being heaven on earth, where disease is majorly eradicated, and civilization is established in truth, beauty, and goodness. It is during this time that the world government becomes more about the coordination of planetary resources, and the veil between the material and spiritual worlds begins to thin. It is during these times that Daenals, or Trinity Teacher sons, make their appearance, becoming visible to the mortal inhabitants of the planet and begin teaching the science of spiritual living. It is this very era that proves the ultimate resilience of God and man, and the evolving appearance of God the Supreme. The narrative of future expansion is tied directly to the concept of God the Supreme. The Urantia Book teaches that the Supreme Being is the evolving God of time and space. Every time a human makes a moral choice, or a creator son brings a planet into a state of light and life, the Supreme Being grows in power and consciousness. When the 7 superuniverses are finally settled, the Supreme Being will have achieved a state of functional completion. At this precise moment, the unpenned era begins. The boundaries of the grand universe, which currently terminates at the borders of the 7th superuniverse, will effectively dissolve, at least according to celestial speculation here, that will create a new, expanded master universe. The creative energy of the paradise deities, which have been focused inward on perfecting the current creation, will begin to flood outward into the void of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th outer space levels. This area of expansion will place a significant role on the final tier with this new age of unprecedented sovereignty. Currently, humans are subjects of the universe. In the future, they will be its administrators. As a fun fact, it is the very notion of being able to draw near to lowly creatures of time that make loyal Lanandadek sons so effective in their planetary prince positions. In fact, we learn in 51.1 that the planetary prince is the final effort of the Eternal Sun and their progeny to draw near to us. When preparing this narrative, I found an interesting fact. Located in 51.3 that states, the Father is not personally present in the local universe, which consequently is indicative of placing a great deal of faith in these planetary princes. However, it is due to that very trait that makes them perhaps more of the susceptible order to foster rebellion. Paper 32 forecasts that the final tiers will serve as the sovereigns of destiny for the new civilizations of the outer reaches. These future beings may not have the same biological or spiritual equipment that we do. They will unlikely be endowed with thought adjusters because many of these people have already fused with them. And they might live in harsh environments that would be instantly fatal to people like us, that are a carbon-based life form. The final tier, possessing the memory of the struggle, will act as a bridge. They will be the ones to explain the nature of the Universal Father to creatures who are starting out on their own evolutionary journeys, trillions of miles and trillions of years removed from the original 7 superuniverses. This administrative duty is not merely political or bureaucratic. It is deeply spiritual. The final tiers will be the living Bibles of these new worlds, because they have actually attained paradise and stood in the presence of the Father. They will represent the ultimate proof that the spiritual climb is possible. In the current age, we rely on faith and revelation. In the future age of the outer space levels, the inhabitants will rely on the personal testimony of the final tiers. This ministry of experience is the crowning achievement of the mortal career. It justifies every tear shed on Urantia and every difficult lesson learned in the local universe that will be used to serve a higher purpose. The final tiers most certainly represent the closest we can come to God the Supreme, and levels of comprehension with ultimate and absolute levels perhaps remaining outside of our perception for the rest of eternity. The Urantia Book hints at the role of the architects of the Master Universe, who actually have the capacity to transcend things like time and space, being at the absonite level of existence, who come very close to the level of ultimacy due to purportedly doing the will of God the Ultimate. These are the beings who hold the blueprints for the entire 4-stage expansion plan. While the final tiers are the executors of the plan, the architects are the designers, likely seeing far into the future. There is a profound synergy between the mind of the architects and the experience of the final tiers as they move into the first outer space level. They will be working with new types of energy and new laws of physics that do not apply within our current superuniverse. Paper 32 suggests that the very nature of space-time may be different in these outer realms. The final tiers will need to be transcendental in their thinking, moving beyond the linear logic of the current age to embrace the absonite logic of the master universe that will transcend time and space, reaching the borders of understanding surrounding God the Ultimate. One of the most intriguing excerpts related to the speculation concerns the secret seventh group of the Corps of Finality. The Urantia Book mentions 6 groups whose composition is known, including mortals, seraphim, and certain midwayers. But the 7th is shrouded in mystery. The authors of the Urantia Book entertain many ideas, embracing possible assignment of some of the accumulating cores of the numerous trinitized groups of Paradise, Vice-Regentin, and the inner circuit of Havona, found in 31.7.4. However, this mystery suggests that the narrative of our future is not yet fully written, or at least comprehended by even much higher celestial beings. There are certain surprises waiting in the outer space levels that even the highest revelators were not permitted to disclose. This open-ended nature of the cosmic story is what makes the Urantia Book's forecast so compelling. It provides a map that goes all the way to the edge of the world, and then says, "Here be wonders." As the narrative slowly winds through the billions of years required to settle our first outer space level, it eventually looks toward the 2nd, 3rd, and eventually the 4th level. Each level is progressively larger than the one that came before it. So large, in fact, that our own series of 7 superuniverses will pale in comparison to what is to come. The 4th outer space level is so vast that the entire grand universe would appear as a tiny speck in its center. The final tiers will eventually be spread across this entire master universe, serving as the glue that holds the entire creation together. They will be the veteran officers of an elite service group, ensuring that the Father's will be done to the farthest reaches of space, just as it is done on the eternal Isle of Paradise. However, there is a monument dedicated in Jerusalem that is sealed by the insignia of a universe sovereign, Christ Michael, that reads, "Undedicated to the 7th stage of spirit, to the eternal assignment." What wonders can the 7th stage bring for us? If the 6th stage of spirit grants us access to God thricefold, then I can only imagine that God the Supreme themselves is a key player in the final stage of spirit existence. What an exciting adventure indeed. In conclusion, the story of the final tier is a story of transformation from a victim of circumstance on a primitive planet to a master of destiny in a limitless universe. The forecast of Paper 32 is a promise that our current lives are not an end in themselves, but a brief, intense apprenticeship for a career of eternal service. We are the ancestors of a future cosmic nobility, and our current choices are the seeds of a harvest that will be reaped in the outer space levels of the far distant future. The narrative of the Urantia Book is an invitation to look up from the dust of the earth and see ourselves as we truly are, the future governor of the stars. Thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I'll see you on the next one.